Yeah, so a little bit about a 2sec up there, who we are. We've been CREST members for some time now. And, fully enjoying the experience, Ian. Thank you very much for that. And a bit about me. I've been in security since about '94. Actually, my first job was for IBM, but obviously I didn't keep it for very, very long. But last time I was here, I was actually doing OS2 warp and LAN server training, if anyone remembers those operating systems. Or I won't play any more old cards. Okay, I'm done. A little bit about what I've done, and I sort of cycle everywhere as well. Get that away. So first bit, I was asked to sort of come and talk about an anatomy of a cyber breach. I gave that a little bit of thought, and there's obviously only so much we can disclose and talk about, even in this room. And if I did take apart a high-profile cyber breach, you'd probably quickly work out who it was. So it's probably quite a bad idea to do that. So on the grounds of sort of ethical disclosure and all that, we're going to sort of tone that down a bit, but we're going to look at some of those key takeaways from that breach and a few others. Even more so, it's been filmed. Who knows where it'll end up? Especially in the hands of those earlier threat intelligence providers, that they could find out all sorts about me. So I'll focus on the principles, the issues, and really the resolutions around that. So first up, I think you've probably all seen the research that Bromium did a couple of years ago and seen these figures bandied about. We do love our statistics, but obviously cybercrime generated huge amount of money for criminals, which is roughly split up like that. So illegal goods, theft of IP, trading stolen data, crime sales, and ransomware. So cybercrime is an economy, and you've got the guys out there, the girls out there. They're all out there to make money, monetize, and those are the stats from Bromium. So big data. There's a lot of big data out there. So big data is a hacker's paradise. I think the early presentations have shown you there's so much data out there. It's easy pickings. There's almost 4.4 billion internet users. You know, if one or two of those are targets, and great news for your cyber criminal. 9 billion or more than 9 billion unique compromised accounts. You can see that on TryHunt's website, havebeenpwned.com. Password lists freely available. I googled some this morning. Biggest one I could find was 1.5 billion. And that kind of shows that there's a lot of passwords being reused. So obviously the amount of compromised accounts is 9 billion, yet there's only 1.5 billion passwords. So I think that goes to say there's a few people using the same password out there. The spam messages are huge. 15 billion spam messages sent every day, emails. That's half of all emails, and the other 15 billion are presumably genuine. And really, the sheer number of internet systems, I mean, they're uncountable these days. Number of IP addresses out there, live systems, huge. It's big data and easy pickings. So I'd like to start really saying that most attacks aren't really targeted. I think a few companies out there do have a little bit of ego and think, well, you know, they're never going to attack me, or, you know, if they do, bring it on. But the hackers we've seen they're indiscriminate. They automate pretty much all of their attacks. And it's quite common to see hackers just trying to compromise thousands of systems, millions of systems all at once, using automated scripts, using all that big data they've got access to. And even if they get one or two easy pickings and make a few £100 out of that, that's good news for them. We'll find that most hackers, well, the way into companies, I mean phishing emails. There's a lot of those going about, and they obviously work, because we still get them. They're still being sent. And as I show later on, we do have a few of our customers who've clicked on those phishing emails and suffered some of those consequences. Phishing emails are a way in, but usually they'll encourage users to click on a fake login page and enter their credentials, and hackers are getting in that way. And to be honest, all you need to do is find an insecure Windows machine, get local admin, and once you've got that, there's a hell of a lot of stuff you can do. I'll talk about sort of pass the hash. I mean, do many people know about that here? A few techies in the audience, or If you're all in sales, I'll just dumb this down a bit. If that way. So parser hash, it works in theory, works in practice. It's been around 10, 20 odd years. It's a really easy way to get into further systems once you've compromised a Windows machine. I can almost read my notes here. But, since I turned 21 last year, my eyes have just gone to shop. All right, got my focus back. So parser hash, hackers don't even need to know passwords to get into systems, and that's the basis of it. I mean, you get a compromised local, you get a local admin privileges on a machine. You can run a tool that dumps out passwords that are in memory or password hashes that are in memory, and you can simply pass those hashes onto other systems on the network to compromise them. That's especially unhelpful if you've had your sysadmin or your domain admin log onto your machine to sort out a support problem maybe a few hours earlier, because also their passwords are stored in memory as well until that machine is rebooted or cycled. And that gives very easy sort of lateral movement. And it's a pretty easy thing to do in a pen test as well, and I'm sure as testers in the audience will be doing that as one of the tools in their arsenal. Unfortunately, most sysadmins I speak to about this, they have no idea this sort of stuff exists. They don't know about a parser hash, and they think, well, it's okay, I'll just use my domain admin account to fix someone's PowerPoint problem and move on to the next, and then leave that machine up and running for a few weeks, and then wonder what's happened when the whole network's been compromised. And the biggest issue there I see is sysadmins just using those privileged accounts of domain admins for day-to-day use. That makes you extremely vulnerable to parser hash, among other things. Also, we see hackers or pen testers or us. We can sniff passwords directly off the wire. So the way Windows machines talk to each other, sending password hashes to each other all the time, especially if they're communicating using older protocols, the LLMNR, MBT, which is, well, I call that as legacy support for earlier versions of Windows, which people should have switched off. But we can spoof a server, pretend we're one of these older legacy servers, talk to a new server, and then pull the passwords off the wire, and use those to log in. But again, you can either crack a password hash with a big computer, or you can use one of these password lists. Doesn't take too long to match a hash on a list of about 1.5 billion password hashes. It's depends how fast your laptop is, but several minutes is usually enough. And the big risk this poses is that we can do all this offline. So all we need is that network connection. We spoof a machine. We grab what's on the wire. We go back to our labs, crack the passwords, and nobody knows we've done it. So it's without detection. Also with local admin, you can obviously install custom malware, some sort of remote backdoor, so hackers, criminals can pull that information back off to their servers in other parts of the world, wherever they are. And there's a bit more big data there for you. I looked back in December, and there's about 17 million pieces of unique malware in circulation today. That's quite a lot. I mean, 10 years ago, there's only about 65 million variants, but there's so many. It's so many different ways to get in, and malware is always evolving. The anti-malware vendors are trying to catch up and come up with signatures or some way to detect those. But the sheer volume of that, the sheer big data, the sheer number of known malware variants means inevitably there's always one bit of malware that's always going to get through. As I said there, I mean, just one bit of custom malware, pretty easy to slip through the net. Also, the detection rate of anti-malware solutions is probably between 99% and 100% of known malware, which is okay, but the unknown stuff you've always got to worry about. So I'm going to do. I've got sort of three examples I can go through. This is the sort of stuff we come across. I mean, first up is ransomware. I mean, that's probably our most popular. Well, it's not our most popular, but the most popular. It's not our ransomware. Where we're going with that. The number one reason people do call us up as incident responders is they've had some sort of ransomware infection, and they don't really know what's going on. I think the figures we've shown before, $600 million a year is being made from ransomware by criminal gangs. Once you get it on the system, it's pretty easy to propagate. There's ransomware that will look for other insecure machines on the local network and try and install itself on there and so forth. But ransomware will also propagate by grabbing all the email addresses in someone's email address book and trying to send the ransomware to everybody else that person knows. But I do praise the anti-malware vendors because they're very quick to solve this problem. I think if there's a few anti-malware vendors mentioned earlier, but they're very quick. I mean, they normally come up with a patch within a few hours if you're on the case. But ransomware, you are held to ransom, funnily enough. But you've normally only got sort of 24 hours or so to pay out the ransom and get your machine recovered. Or you can rely on the response of an anti-malware vendor. So maybe that is a case for using anti-malware solutions. I always think, like Microsoft should really have invulnerable systems that don't really need anti-malware, but you've got the guys out there that can help and can get rid of these ransomware issues, and that way. So another sort of case study, I call it spam infestation. So more than one client has done this. They've actually clicked on a phishing link to a fake Office 365 login page. Unfortunately, in this case, these guys didn't have any multi-factor authentication turned on or enabled. I don't think they even knew what it was, which is a bit unfortunate. And there again, there's these automated scripts and tools that hackers can use to really targeting the Office 365 APIs. They don't even need to log on to each mailbox and try and propagate propagate the spam one by one. They can do it en masse. Within about a few seconds, they could email every single email address in someone's address book that same spam message, and propagate it that way. This was a bit of a problem because it's not only the users in that organisation that got sent this spam, but it's also the entire customer base of this particular client. I can say they're in professional services, accountancy or solicitor, that sort of ilk. And to be honest, if you're a customer of one of these organisations, you trust your accountant, you trust your solicitor, you get an email from them, you say, well, okay, well, click that link, must be all right. But normally it wasn't. But that caused a lot of grief. And I think the biggest issues there and biggest takeaways, and this is something people should really know about, was to enable MFA. Make sure if email accounts and passwords are compromised that you've got that extra level of protection, MFA, to stop that being perpetrated any further. But also in that case, one of the guys that clicked on the phishing link was a global admin, just using his global admin account as his main email account. And the good news is that the hackers or the people behind the attack had no idea it was a global admin account. They could have done a lot worse, but that's not something they should have applauded themselves with, really. So probably another. These incidents, they're slowly getting worse. And I've called this one toast because these guys were toast. Do forgive me whilst I peer at my notes. So one client, it's a software vendor on our client list. They started to see quite a few account lockouts. Users couldn't log in and wondering what's going on. They took a reactive approach, have a quick look at some firewall logs. Then they saw a lot of traffic going to and from a particular IP address that wasn't anything they knew about. At which point they called us. We found custom malware, 300 plus machines, probably more, and it kept popping up all over the place. It was a bit like whack-a-mole. We'd see one instance there, you'd close it down, disinfect it, move on to the next. It was a bit of a busy Christmas, that one, unfortunately. And we do work all hours. And the source of that, we didn't really know how they got in. We think it's probably a phishing email, but likewise it could have been an insider. These guys had pretty much a dev department that ruled the roost there. Their whole devs insisted on having local admin accounts. So, you know, it could have been one of them, or they could have just clicked on a phishing link or installed some malware inadvertently and done that way. The knock-on effect of that, there's a lot of password reuse going on in this organisation. So the same usernames and passwords were, you know, on their local servers, domain controllers. Unfortunately, it was the same on their Azure, Office 365 install, global admin accounts, GitHub, which is unfortunately a route where all of their source code was sort of accessed. We don't really know what happened to it, but being a software vendor, that caused a bit of a hiccup. You don't want your source code to go walkies, but their GitHub account was compromised, but they couldn't really approve who did it and how much was taken, so they weren't really looking at the logs. So it's a bit of a disaster all round, really. But I think the biggest, and I call it toad, they're still in business, still going. They're operating and doing the best they can. But the biggest issue there was password reuse. I mean, there's too many passwords were the same on too many systems. And if they had changed that one thing, like put a different password in each different system, that'd have been fine. So something so simple, so basic, it was missing, and you're toast. Hence the picture, it says toast. But also, if you want to go into more depth of that, there's other issues. They had one big flat network that the devs were ruling the roost. They could do what they want. There's no proactive log monitoring, excessive privileges, no defense against any lateral movement. And they have legacy services enabled, so the whole LLMNR MBT stuff was enabled too. So I hope this sort of helps if we're getting the right sort of message across about our best clients' worst disasters. But I don't know. And a more recent one, I don't know if you've heard about the Citra vulnerability in December. Not really. A few nods at the front, that's good. Right, there we go. Yeah, so we got one of those as well. So NetScaler's motto was any application on any device from any location. It says on their website, but they should add to that without any authentication at the end, really. And that was a biggie because the vulnerability was published by Citra 2019, and it actually went back all the way to 2014 versions. So there's a big 5-year window of exposure. Citra had no idea that it was exploitable, and until that research was published, and there's no, it's just no saying how many people have been using that, exploiting it. If you had nation states playing around with it, trying to get in, criminals, who knows. And very quickly after that, it took 3 or 4 weeks for someone to actually publish exploit code on the internet. Great, and that was before most customers have had a chance to actually patch or address their systems, because notably they're probably all away for Christmas, to be in fairness. And we had a few comments back. I mean, the guy that set them up doesn't work anymore. We thought this stuff just worked and did its job. That's brave of them to say that to me, but they tried. There's a lot of trust in Citra and NetScaler. I think it's a trusted vendor. They pride themselves on being secure. You don't expect them to go wrong. In this particular environment, I don't think they'd patched their NetScalers for several years, even before this exploit was possible. And what went missing there, C-suite mailboxes and file shares were compromised. But again, there's a no, but I think we don't know who took it. We don't know who took the data. I mean, there's someone who got in for the unified access gateway, taken all this stuff. There weren't any log files on the NetScalers because the hackers had removed them. No central logging. So again, we know stuff was compromised. We know it was exposed, but we had no idea what and how much had gone, which was a interesting conversation with the ICO later they had, actually. And I think the biggest issue there is general lack of proactive patching for non-Microsoft systems. Everyone thinks, well, we keep our Microsoft stuff all up to date, we'll be okay. But I'll also put down the vendor as a possible issue there. But too much faith in, a lot of correct faith in Microsoft for having auto updates and Windows updates going on. But all the other vendors that are on your systems or customer systems, they all need patching too. So if you don't, stuff like that will happen. And I think, in hindsight, which is always a great thing, there's quite a few easy things that we've identified that customers should be implementing, but you should advise all customers to do, and it's all just baby stuff really. I feel a bit embarrassed to look at that slide and say everything in it really, but I think we've learned that you don't use privileged accounts on a day-to-day basis, and people are still doing this today. But we're not talking small startup companies. We're talking some big FTSE names here. And they're using privileged accounts, and they shouldn't be. There's a lot of legacy stuff still enabled, especially when I look at those old Windows LLMNR and MBT issues. A lot of passwords are being reused all over the place. These are all companies that should know a lot better. But certainly you can do stuff like password audits. I mean, you can pull out an NTLM file and just crack all the passwords and show the customer where the issues lie. Systems, IT has always been quite a fluid industry with contractors. People come on board for 2 or 3 years and they move on, sometimes 2 or 3 months. They set stuff up and then they leave. But people aren't always too sure what they've actually set up. Companies should always look to try and prevent lateral movement. Like a host-based file would be helpful. So if one machine is compromised, then the workstation or server next to it can't be compromised by that firewall, by that workstation. Patch everything again and test anti-malware systems. It's amazing how many people don't actually test their anti-malware solutions. But there's test strings out there like ICAR or icar.org. You can send that around an email, dump it on people's desktops, and actually detect your systems can actually detect malware. You'd think that would be an obvious thing, but do that. And lastly, I think we've all got to. If basic stuff like this isn't being addressed, then it's quite likely attackers are already inside your networks. So operate a zero trust architecture and assume you already are compromised. And then you'll kind of get the idea of what to do to fix that all moving forwards. And sort of last but not least, incident response is so important. And I think I think it's a statistic that you'll get breached or you'll have some sort of incident. But it's amazing how many customers don't really know how to. I shouldn't say customers, sorry. Organisations, they don't really know what to do if there is an incident. But if you do have an incident response plan, policies and procedures in place, and you made that business as usual, you can really reduce the time to recovery and make it effective. And so last but not least, companies are like people. So companies will suffer exactly the same issues as your home user does. I think that's quite an obvious parallel. We've got things like password reuse. In your average, I don't think your mum and dad or whatever, if they've got LinkedIn or Facebook or Gmail or Dropbox, they've probably got the same password on all of them. That's exactly the same problem that a company will face. Home users, they'll patch their Microsoft systems, but who knows what else is on their systems? They might have downloaded some Adobe stuff, some Apple QuickTime, all this other stuff. They just don't pay any attention to it or do any patching of that. But it's exactly the same in a company or a corporation. They behave like home users. And of course at home everybody uses their local admin account. I think we can, oh dear, you nodded. We shouldn't be. But big companies are exactly the same. They will use local admin accounts on a daily basis. Exactly the same as sort of home users do. So I think the takeaway we try and give organisations is really that security awareness should start at home. If you can address these basic things on a home level, especially with your C-suite or senior execs, then hopefully that will sort of filter down. But I think until then, people like us are going to be kept very busy. Wow. So I hope that helps. It wasn't a complete breakdown of a cyber attack, I'm afraid, but all those slides are very relevant. They've cost companies a lot of money and embarrassment and brand damage. So do take that on board and hope that helps. And any questions?